Heyo, you're listening to Edge Coach Quip, featuring our very own Edge coaches and community, dropping knowledge nuggets to fuel your day. Hey guys, welcome back to episode 118 of Coach Quip. I'm Coach Robyn.
I'm Coach Chris.
And today we are talking about something which I really appreciated this discussion with the coaches. It is qualities of coachable athletes. So we have weekly calls with our coaching consortium, which frankly are some of my favorite meetings that we have every single week. We have standard things that we go over like updates, but then we always have a topic that we talk about. And it can be educational or it could be roundtable. This one was roundtable. And I wanted to know what you all thought about, like what makes like your kind of perfect athlete. And it could be someone that's on your roster, or it could be someone that's aspirational, or just these traits that you know really can stack some amazing bricks, and then share them with you all. And Coach Chris said, let's put it on a Quip.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and I think a lot of it was, stuff that I was also like, oh yeah, I look for that too. But to hear other coaches articulate it was really interesting. So we picked out our top 8 qualities from our coaches of what we desire, what makes our perfect athlete, and we're going to go through them right now.
First up, the first one counts as the Quip. It is a good attitude. So really being able to roll with the good and the bad. I think part of this is anticipating the bad. That is going to be a part of the process, right? It's like Alexi Pappas and the rule of thirds, knowing that you're going to have a third be complete crap, a third be okay, and a third be great, allows you to have really a better attitude about everything, right? Not having something blow up and then just completely losing your mind. It is completely true that the athletes that have sometimes the greatest amount of gift don't always become the best athletes, because if they have a bad attitude or a sense of entitlement, or they're not a team player or any of those things, or they freak out at bad training days, they're not going to be as successful as an average athlete with a really good attitude.
I agree completely. The entitlement part that you just said, that's huge, because I think that we are seeing that a lot now, particularly with, I think, like younger people get a bad rep for being entitled, but definitely have seen that with athletes that I've encountered. And if you have that good attitude, you're willing, it's the willingness to put in the work, the willingness to be curious. A lot of the things that we're going to talk about, a lot of these are connected, obviously, but it all starts with a good attitude.
Yeah, that is the baseline. All right, that's the first. We got 7 more. Stay tuned for the bonus miles.
All right, welcome back. We're going through our top traits of coachable athletes with tip number 2, or trait number 2, which is the willingness to be vulnerable. So this one I think can be thought of in a lot of different ways. But for me, I think it kind of means leaning into the tough workouts, or what would be sort of a bad workout. Depending on how you judge it, I think bad is a personal judgment, right? If you think of everything with that good attitude from trait number 1, even if you're failing forward. And so being willing to be vulnerable, and that means that sometimes we do post something on Strava that is a slower pace when we had a struggle workout or a tough workout, and being open to sharing that experience, or at least acknowledging that experience happened. Because we have a lot of people, particularly on social media, who only show the highlights, right? And we know that training isn't like that. So when people are not afraid of failure, and they think of that more with a curious mindset of seeing what they can do, and even if they don't hit their original goals, that willingness to be vulnerable can really help them level up faster, because that then becomes their new normal, and those bricks stack pretty quickly.
I love to, when we have bad workouts, understanding that maybe it was part of like a bigger picture. Like we went trail running this last week, and we had 2 athletes kind of twist their ankles because it was really tricky footing, and it was lots of leaves, and one of them has a race this weekend, and I was like, hey, you got your bobble out of the way, like now next weekend to not let your guard down if there are tricky areas to sight. And she really did kind of land on her feet and is okay, but I'm like, let us learn that lesson this way, and she was upset about it, understandably so, but then understand pretty quickly, okay, I could be mad about it, but also see that it plays into a bigger picture here.
Yeah, and I also think about this vulnerability piece in terms of social recovery, which we talked about in a past episode, and the draft horse effect.
Yep.
Right, so when people are willing to say that they are struggling in a workout, or they share with people afterwards, that vulnerable moment of saying, "Oh, I really struggled in that long run," or "I had a really hard time with this segment," that can help people level up faster too, because they're sharing that and they get that encouragement and support.
Yeah, and they're admitting it too, which makes it more relatable, right? Your teammates want to help.
Yep.
All right, number 3 is learning from mistakes and willingness to pivot. This is such a big one, and they all kind of do in a way play into, each of them plays into each other. However, we know with mistakes, whether it's a mistake you made or maybe it was just stuff that happened, like or me as a coach, right, writing mistakes, not everything's going to go as planned, right? So owning up to it and really responding to it from an ownership standpoint really allows you to change and pivot and kind of move into a new direction and fail forward, for using that term again, for sure. It does come from, though, a desire to improve, and I do think that you have to be pretty foolhardy and pretty self-confident to have this trait, and you have to be able to think, is this going to be a big deal a year from now, right? And not ride the waves of emotion as it's happening. So accepting that mistakes are going to happen, rolling with it, and really see them as an opportunity to kind of pivot and change things.
Sure, and that's big picture mistakes in training, of like not tackling hills when you have a hilly race coming up, right? But it can also be those pivots that people are able to make in races.
Yes.
So I think about like our Ironman athletes or our marathoners. Those are really long races where a lot can go wrong, particularly in an Ironman, right? There are so many factors, and say you drop your nutrition.
Yep.
So how do you bounce back from that? Those athletes that are able to pivot and think on the fly are always more successful than those ones who are so rigidly set to their plan.
I follow pros on Instagram. I'll never forget, one of my favorite female pros wrote about why she loves ultras, and it was actually, and she's a very accomplished runner, but her biggest reason was the problem solving. She likes that, like, when something is going wrong, that you have to kind of redirect your energy and troubleshoot, and that troubleshooting, wow, you can really stack those bricks.
Yeah, and I think as a coach, this is something that I've definitely learned from you, is you take extreme ownership, right?
I love this book. Read
book.
it, people.
You take extreme ownership of your coaching plans, and I've always seen you take accountability for, even if it's an athlete's mistake, that you are always owning up to any role
What I
that
could
you
have done
might
better.
have, that you might have played in that. And I think I've learned a lot from you as a coach.
That is a learned behavior.
Yeah,
let me tell
it
you.
absolutely is.
For me too. And I think it's cool, though. I think sometimes athletes are and coaches hesitate to admit the mistake, but it is so much the opposite. If you are supposed to be pacing your group, let's say, and you take them out too hot, and then by the end of the run they are dead, and you're thinking in your mind, oh my goodness, I think I did that to them. Saying it out loud is only going to have them feel better, right? And then also it's going to make them more willing to do the same, which is going to just lead to overall better growth, right? And I love that idea about owning it to kind of lower the walls and be able to rebuild them better.
Sure, and that goes back to the last piece about being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So yeah, it all ties together. All right, our next one, also related here, is the willingness to be uncomfortable. So being open to being uncomfortable, and I think I've seen this written on the mirrors here. Be willing, or what is it? Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And a lot of athlete success is like, how long can you stay uncomfortable and ride that line of discomfort? I think that this is a big one for folks, that willingness to challenge themselves, the willingness to try something new, whether it's a strength move that you've never done before or that you're traditionally not great at, or trying a faster pace, trying a different pace group or a different workout. There are so many things that, it's so easy to stay in our comfort zone.
It is.
And the willingness to step out or push up against that wall is what makes a successful athlete.
This is also one that can really catch on like wildfire. If you're in a group and someone next to you, I do this all the time in strength class. If I see someone grabbing a 20 and I'm like, oh shit, I should be grabbing a 20, right? And then I go and get a 20. So, it is, if you are willing to be that person to get a little bit more uncomfortable, we don't mean you need to do this all the time either, but when it counts, chances are you're going to cause this amazing ripple effect too. All right, next up is consistency. This one is a boring one, but it is a great one, right? The easiest way to gain fitness is by being consistent. We do not need your training to be perfect or throttled, period. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We need consistency over all things. Consistency over perfection, consistency over intensity. We need consistency over all things. So showing up and doing the work as best as you possibly can is always going to stack the most bricks. Again, this is all assuming that you're following a plan that's progressive and has appropriate cutbacks and everything, but being able to have an appropriate level of build and that slow drip is always it's coachable. We definitely understand as coaches that you go through periods where it is hard to be consistent, but then scale your expectations. If you used to be able to do 5-6 days a week of training, and let's say you've had a kid and you're like, oh my goodness, this is just not working out, right? You then go down to 3. Choose your 3 key workouts and be consistent with those. There's a way to adapt it, pivot, going back to an earlier point, and then making it be able to be consistent is always, it makes our hearts happy, it makes our minds happy. We love habit, we thrive on habit. Athletes, humans thrive on habit. It just builds some of the best possible ways that you can conquer your days and weeks.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation about this morning, and with some of my athletes, the most coachable athletes that I have in this time period now where it's off-season or base training for most athletes. It's also really cold outside, it's really dark, and motivation across the board during the holiday season kind of wanes. Yep, it's low.
The couch motivation is high.
It's very, very high, yes. Our streaming services motivation, very high right now. But when we're in that time period, that consistency is what really matters. So we've just scaled our expectations where we're not targeting an hour workout. I want 20 minutes of movement right now in this time period just for that consistency. Our discipline has to take over when our motivation wanes, and I think that is a big piece of having a consistent schedule.
One more thing on consistency too, in a post-COVID era, and this is a really big one. Do not ever assume that the consistency you had in a different phase of life, and I've kind of already said this, is the same way that you need to have consistency now. Consistency that I did before Opening Edge, I could never sustain now. I wouldn't have a business. It would be closed, right? There's no way for me to train 20 plus hours a week.
Right.
So, but what I've learned is I can take that much heavier work model and adapt it to what I can do now and have the same output, which is a pretty cool learning too. But if life has changed, that's cool, right? Figure out a different way to make it happen. And I promise you that the joy and the accomplishment is just as high. I think that we are worried that we'll fall behind because we're not doing things the same way. I can tell you right now that is not the case. We used to run challenges, and and we still do, but we used to require 3 times a week in person, 45 minutes, no 30-minute classes. You had to be here. And we are getting the same results with still 3 workouts a week, but they can do one on their own. They can do it on demand. They can do it virtual. And we are seeing the same results, the same happiness, the same success with a very different way to skin that cat.
Yeah, and it's about the ability to pivot,
Yep.
right? So we can't be locked into that old way of thinking, and you're right, there's different seasons of life,
Yep.
and we have to be willing to be able to make those changes. So our next one is being process-oriented, not goal-oriented. I love this one because I think the athletes that I coach who are in love with training, not just training to train, they do still do races, but they don't put all their eggs in the race basket. And that has been such an amazing shift for some athletes, and also just an amazing trait for others to have, because their value or their happiness is not contingent upon one day, one activity. They don't judge their success of their entire season or of that even race based on the outcome. Because the truth is there are so many factors that we can't control. Like somebody else's training. You can't control the weather, you can't control who shows up that day. So if you're placing your value and worth as an athlete on making a podium, that might be out of reach on any particular day, out of your control, right? So, having that love of the process, which is the consistency, it is the stacking bricks, that has been one of the most coachable traits that I've seen my athletes have.
And it lends itself truly to kind of a mental calmness, which, again, for me, I do very well with athletes that have that kind of even, not all the time energy. I want them to have some passion too, but they are the type of athletes that if they're 30K into a 50K and it's going sideways, they have the mental calmness to be able to pull up, look down, and be like, okay, this is what I need to do between now and then. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm not going to freak out. And man, that is such a great life skill, right? Mm-hmm. All of these are in general, but that one especially, being able to be mentally able to process when things are going bananas, because you're not just worried about the goal. You're understanding that it is about the process, that is gold.
Yeah, and Nike is famous for, the Nike training is measure success in as many ways as possible.
Yep.
Something that I've often heard them say. And I think that's so true, that, it's in that race when things are going sideways, being able to pull out and look at the big picture and go, I'm still going to finish this race because I'm not injured. I just am not having a great time right now. And what can I learn from it along the way? And, to your point about it helping other parts of your life, I had an athlete actually say to me last week that they've noticed that they are more prepared for their meetings and doing better work in the workplace because of the way that they've learned to prepare themselves through running. And I just thought that was such a cool pull out from them, and really insightful for them to reflect on their experience in their training cycle and say, the way that I'm preparing for a race is actually helping me prepare for projects and presentations, and it's making me a better all-around person, which is the goal of this, right? Like,
that is our mission statement.
Exactly. Most people are not getting paid to do this, and so it's about how can this enhance your life, and how can you do it for a really long time if that's what you want to do, and that's that consistency and being process oriented, not goal oriented, is another great way to do that.
All right, next up is Grit. I also love this book. Grit is a great book. Please, if you are interested in the subject, it really helps, I think, to read about it, because you're like, what does that mean? We looked up the actual definition. It is an unyielding courage in the face of hardship. I say it's being scrappy AF. Figuring out a way to get things done when there is not a way is just such a commendable skill, and again can really, really, really inspire others. And it's one of those things where at the end of the day, and Coach Bennett, the global head coach for Nike Running, always talks about this, is at the end of the day, we want you to be able to not only be 1% better, but truly look in the mirror and be like, proud of yourself. And Grit is one of those things for me that does that. Like when I've had a crazy day and I still figure out a way to get it done, I can take a shower at the end of the night and put my face cream on and be like, yes, we did it. We've arrived. And it can yield to a lot of really great self-confidence in knowing that you can tackle things.
Okay, kudos on your nighttime skincare routine, first of all. Well done. But also, for me, this is about determination, right? So like grit and determination, but it's like determination with an asterisk. It's like not at all costs, but like an extra step that you can be determined, but it's easy to have roadblocks that come up, especially now, right? Like if you are working a full-time job, you have a family, and you're doing your training, it's very easy for those opportunities to slip away. But that determination with like that little extra, like I'm going to get this done. I know I've said this in the past, but it's about keeping your promises to yourself, right? Like that piece that is very, very closely tied with grit for me. You're right. Those aren't the same. Never thought about that before. They are. All right, and our final coachable trait is being others oriented. So I really like this edition of this one. It's about being a good teammate. We have a couple of people that we have in mind as we say this who really help to lift everybody else up around them. And they're not always the strongest or most successful athletes, but sometimes they are the leaders out there. And I think every person has this ability to raise up the people around them by being a good teammate, by being a good teammate, by encouraging others, by setting a good example. It's that positive mindset. It's a lot of the other things that we've said that can help people be others oriented, where it's not just about their own personal success. They feel a sense of success when other people do well too.
I am a loud coach, I'm a loud athlete, especially on race day, and I understand all my other loudies out there. I am always so impressed when athletes are other oriented and they're quiet leaders. This is so sneaky good for me. And I have a few of them on my roster, you know who you are, that just want to show up and lift up and do it in such a selfless way that is not screaming on the side. I mean, they'll absolutely give you high fives and everything else, but it is by leading by example, and they know that their purpose is to rise that tide to lift all the boats. And that is who I want to coach. Yeah. All right, to recap these amazing athlete traits that we love to see in the coachable athlete. First up is a good attitude, the ability to roll with the good and the bad.
Second up is a willingness to be vulnerable with other people, to be vulnerable in your training, and just to challenge yourself.
Number 3 is to learn from mistakes. Don't freak out about them. Be willing to embrace them, learn from them, own up to them, and pivot.
Next up is athletes who are willing to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
So much of training is uncomfortable.
Lean into discomfort.
Number 5 is consistency. Consistency above all else. It might look wildly different than it did pre-COVID, pre-life changes. That's cool. But being consistent as you are now is the number one way to stack some beautiful bricks.
Next up is being process-oriented, not goal-oriented. So really leaning into the whole big picture of your training, not just putting all your eggs in one race basket.
Number 7, grit and determination. Keep the promises that you made to yourself. Look in the mirror at night and like what you see.
And our last one is being others-oriented. Those athletes who are quiet leaders or the loud ones who are lifting everybody else up around them as they do their own work.
All right, reflect on these. Some of them I know live within you, and we love to see it. So keep showing up.
And some of them are probably within your reach. So if there's one of these that sort of piques your interest, see what you can do to try to lean into these coachable qualities.
Awesome. Thanks, coaches, and thanks everyone for listening. Next time.
Thanks for listening to Coach Quip. Original music performed by Mend. Follow us online on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edge Athlete Lounge. Our podcast lives in the blog section of our website. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and you can check out the show notes for additional ways to contact us. Ready, set, onward we go.